Yo, bite, don't come, you gotta bite. Hey, buku, no. Kamu jauh. Tunggu dulu. Kau boleh lari ni. Kita pasal. Kau kumil. Kita pasal. Tunggu dulu. Ah!
So we're going to talk about chimpanzees today, and if you are the first person to name the 4 other animals that are knuckle walkers, you'll be the pinned comment in today's video. So chimpanzees, or pan-troglodytes, not so stupid, not so ugly. Check out the shorts to learn about why their butts are so ugly. Anyway, so chimpanzees inhabit rainforests, open woodlands, savannas, from western Uganda to eastern Tanzania, and within this range there are 4 subspecies. Now, I don't go into subspecies all that much because when it's all said and done, all of these subspecies belong to the same species. They're all pan-troglodytes. But basically just know that subspecies are geographically isolated, so in natural settings, the subspecies don't interbreed with each other. If their ranges were ever to connect again, they probably would be able to breed. And as a result of that geographical isolation, they have kind of like changed some morphological characteristics that make them look a lot different from one another. And you know, in a way, subspecies are kind of a precursor to speciation because given a couple million years, if they continue to stay isolated, it's inevitable that one or all of them are going to mutate to some capacity where they would no longer be able to reproduce, meaning that those mutations would make their genetic differences so different that they wouldn't be able to reproduce. So who knows, maybe in a few million years, there will be 4 chimpanzee-like species on the planet, with the common ancestor being the chimpanzee that I'm talking about in this video. So from male pattern baldness in pan-troglodytes, to the young of pan-troglodytes varus having that notable central part, and I always thought that was humans doing that to those poor little things. But these are the kinds of morphological differences you see across the chimpanzee subspecies. Regardless of the superficial morphological differences in the subspecies, they all share the same insane biology. Generally, and with some exceptions, chimpanzees are covered in thick black hair, minus on the face, the ears, their hands, and their feet. They have a pronounced brow line and flexible lips, and it's a chimp's face that is capable of displaying some notable expressions. Unlike my cat, who just has like resting bitch face. And the facial expressions of a chimpanzee are pretty darn relatable to those that you see in humans. So a group of people having a gay old time enjoying a meal is going to look very similar to a group of chimpanzees enjoying a meal together. A bored human is going to look very much so like a bored chimpanzee. So you're not anthropomorphizing. That angry looking chimpanzee probably is angry, and once I tell you about how strong these motherfuckers are, you'd be correct that the best course of action is to run and hide. If you look at their skulls, they have these large canine teeth. These teeth are often associated with carnivores, as these teeth are responsible for tearing the flesh of prey, but they also support the shape of the muzzle, and with chimpanzees, these canines are often utilized as weapons in vicious and often fatal attacks. While they do eat small animals, they are omnivores, with fruit making up most of their diet, followed by leaves, bark, and insects. Meat makes up about 1 to 6% of their diet, but some of the chimpanzees that are adapted to more of the open woodlands or savanna type environments, they seem to be eating meat more often, meaning meat makes up a greater portion of their diet. In my Jane Goodall video, I mentioned that the discovery that put her on the map was that she observed chimpanzees stripping leaves from a stick and fishing for termites. It was the first time an animal was seen using a tool. Now, later, Jane saw chimpanzees also hunting down animals like bush pigs and colobus monkeys. And the hunt was more like predator chasing the prey. Think of the lion chasing the zebra. But scientists have observed chimpanzees expanding their tool use, crafting spears, then jabbing the spear into tree trunks to obtain a bush baby.
This is actually a spear that an adult female named Lucille, that we call Lucille, made to try and obtain a bush baby. So what she did was break off a live branch and then used it to jab into the hole where the bush baby was in an effort to get it, but she was unsuccessful.
Even a few years ago, a chimpanzee was caught on camera displaying behavior like they were spearfishing. And this fishing type behavior has actually been seen in orangutans before. So it's like our apes are going through the Stone Age. Of course, what makes chimpanzees and other apes so adapted for tool use are their opposable thumbs. I'm so corny. Opposable thumbs! Oh my god. So the opposable thumbs of the forelimbs mean they can grasp objects like tools, and they have the dexterity to pick up small objects. The opposable thumbs also allow for them to climb to come more easily. And with their feet also having opposable toes, or in hallux, they are very strong climbers indeed. Chimpanzees spend about half their time in the trees and then the other half on the ground. Now, supposedly, humans and chimpanzees have this unknown common ancestor. And one of the main differences between chimpanzees and humans is that we walk upright exclusively, unless you're 5 and pretending to be a dog. Or just pretending. But chimps switch between bipedalism and quadrupedalism quite often, and this distinction is largely unknown, but it is something scientists are dying to understand. Now, I want to preface with this sent me kind of down a rabbit hole, and there is a lot of literature surrounding the evolution of bipedalism, but just know that it is still unknown. And I can see where it's causing a little bit of a division in the scientific community. But I did find this one article from 2001 that summarized the hypotheses around bipedal evolution fairly well. And so the 4 hypotheses that exist today include this common ancestor was a tree dweller, and they walked on all 4s above the branches when they moved about the trees. So this is very similar to how monkeys move about in the trees. Or it's possible this common ancestor was a terrestrial quadruped and they walked on their palms, so kind of like that, or like this, on the tips of their fingers, their knuckles, or their fists. And to give you some examples, like elephants and horses, they do walk on their tippy toes, actually. Gorillas and chimpanzees walk on their knuckles, and then orangutans have kind of, it seems like they switch between walking on their palms or walking on their fists. The third hypothesis is that we have a hylobation ancestor. So this is an ancestor that is kind of like a gibbon, but they didn't do as much as that brachiation or the arm swinging when they are in the trees and moving about. It's more so that they're saying that this ancestor probably was very small bodied with very long hind limbs and a long lumbar spine, very similar to what we have. And they moved bipedally in the trees, like when foraging. And that basically served as this transitional phase to terrestrial bipedalism. Now, as I said, this hypothesis is kind of modeled off of gibbons, and gibbons actually, of all the great apes, they walk bipedally the most. And then the last one is a climbing ancestor that was mostly arboreal or in the trees, but they didn't move like the above branch ancestor, and they were larger bodied, like more so than the hylobation model. So this is kind of alluding to them moving about in the trees similar to an orangutan. All of this is to say that our family tree isn't necessarily set in stone, but depending on bipedalism's true evolution, either humans and chimps are most closely related to each other, and so our family tree looks like this. And for the most part, it seems like this is the widely acceptable family tree configuration currently. But if things change, it could be that humans, chimps, and gorillas have the same ancestor and we branched out separately. Or chimps and gorillas are in a clade with humans, branching off with a sister taxon. Now, in that 2001 article, the scientists made the case that bipedalism more than likely evolved through a knuckle-walking ancestor, and that's supported by similarities in humans, chimps, and gorillas' hands. And they're basically saying that because of the skeletal structures of our hands, those similarities just don't jive really well with the other hypotheses that say that bipedalism evolved from an arboreal origin. So that is to say, our family tree still looks like this. But more recent studies, as in 2014, I cannot believe that was 10 years ago, the scientists that published that article argued that bipedalism indeed has arboreal origins. And the basis for this was because because fossils that were found in the early 2000s and studied, their skeletal structures demonstrated they were upright a lot. Based on their size, they were about the same weight as the great apes that exist today, so fairly large-bodied. Given the ecological context, meaning most great apes and even like the fossil records suggest that a lot of these like ape fossils lived in highly forested areas, and it was just inevitable that they were going to be in the trees at least at some point. And considering all that, most great apes today walk bipedally in the trees. So it seems more plausible to say that this common ancestor was probably arboreal or a tree dweller. And of course, for this study in particular, they're kind of like fitting the hypotheses in with the tree climbing ancestor, so more modeled off of the orangutan. And I do just want to say that this article was really spicy, and this is why I sort of think it's causing a division in the scientific community. But they have some quotes like, "This indicates that they didn't read our paper well. Even the title alluded to locomotion rather than posture." And so this is in response to a critique from an earlier paper that they put out. But then they have in their conclusion, "The 50-year reign of knuckle-walking paradigm must be declared over," because I don't think I really said that, but as we currently stand right now, the like acceptable hypothesis is that bipedalism evolved from knuckle-walking ancestors. They're saying it's over though. And I don't know, it might be, because actually there is a study that was done in 2022 that makes the point that the knuckle-walking hypothesis is supported by evidence provided by chimps, bonobos, and gorillas. And then the other hypotheses are supported by evidence provided by orangutans and gibbons. Meaning, like, how do you want to look at the evolution of bipedalism? Do you want to look at skeletal structure, how often animals today are walking bipedally, or do you kind of want to base it off of the genetics, such as the case for chimpanzees and gorillas? It's kind of hard to say. We're kind of trying to piece that together. But this article went on to say that whatever extant species are predisposed to bipedalism, then that common ancestor would probably have to have that body form. And so they're making the case for the hylobation model, meaning that because gibbons today walk bipedally more than any other ape, and they have the body form that is best suited for bipedalism, it seems like the common ancestor should have that body form. And this is supported further with the fossil record, because there's a ton of fossils that were found in the Miocene period that exhibit the same upright and long lumbar skeletal structure. So the skeletal structure that best supports bipedalism. So one of the fossils is named Ardipithecus ramidus, and this skeleton, although it was partial, it had an elongated skeleton, engaged in upright walking, and was in the trees quite frequently, and probably was not a knuckle walker. So considering where Ardipithecus is on our current family tree, it is believed that bipedal evolution fits the hylobation model a little better. And it may mean the family tree will be reconstructed, because maybe knuckle walking is specific to the pan and the gorilla genuses. So pan as in Pantroglodytes for chimpanzees, and then the gorilla species, and that knuckle walking evolved in parallel with humans' bipedalism. Now, to bring this all back to chimpanzees, studies have compared humans' bipedalism and then chimpanzees' bipedalism, and we found that we walk differently. Now, when humans walk, we display this counter rotation, meaning our thorax and pelvis rotates. For humans, they rotate in opposite directions. So like that, I don't know. I'll put a picture of how that looks. With chimpanzees, they have hips that are wide and tall, a short lumbar column, and a large lower rib cage. And these features have led scientists to believe for the longest time that chimps were very rigid up top in their bipedalism. And it's kind of always been assumed that they lack that counter rotation ability that we see in humans. However, a more recent study shows that the counter rotations do occur in chimpanzees. In fact, their upper body twists more than humans, but they walk with their thorax and their hips in the same direction. Because I know you want to watch me make an ass of myself, this is what walking like a chimp looks like. Now, have you ever heard the saying that nature is lazy? Like, animals do this on a conscious and subconscious level to preserve energy. It's one of the reasons why an animal might back down from a fight. At a certain point, they're making this like internal calculation in their head. Where I'm at right now with my injuries, it's going to take me days to heal. It's not worth continuing to fight over this territory or this mate. So they back down and, they let the competitor take the mate or the territory. Now, with chimpanzees, they walk quadrupedally more than they do bipedally. So it would be correct to assume that walking quadrupedally is conserving more energy, and that's why they walk quadrupedally more. However, chimps use about the same amount of energy walking bipedally as they do quadrupedally. Really, chimpanzees usually only walk bipedally when they are holding something or carrying something and they need some kind of extended vantage point. And so this is specifically when they're on the ground. However, our bipedalism is way more efficient compared to chimpanzees' bipedalism. And so this tells us that bipedalism didn't give rise because of the energy savings alone. Instead, it gave rise because our ancestors valued carrying over greater distances, and when we moved to forested areas to more open savannas, we further took advantage of bipedalism by being able to look over the tall grass. When walking quadrupedally, chimpanzees are knuckle walkers. Now, this is a type of walking style that is shared with gorillas, anteaters, pangolins, and platypuses. And ultimately, knuckle walking provides them with extra stability and it prevents stumbling. But when looking at the two great apes, the skeletal structures, especially for the wrists and the hands, they are structurally different, and the bones that are engaged during knuckle walking differs as well. For chimpanzees, it became a thing because they spend more time in the trees compared to gorillas. Their livelihood, however, is in the trees. Like, they do more in the trees. So they're traveling, foraging, hunting, eating, sleeping, and socializing. All that stuff will take place in the trees. But not all of those activities occur on the ground. And of those that do, they don't happen nearly as often. For example, one study said that chimpanzees will spend about 5 to 6 hours eating in the trees, whereas eating on the ground seldomly occurs. Nesting and sleeping solely happens in the trees. Now, because of the time that they spend in the trees, they have evolved to be insanely strong. In fact, on a pound for pound basis, they are stronger than humans, so let's get into why. There are two types of muscles: fast twitch and slow twitch. Fast twitch muscles give power and fatigue quickly. Slow twitch muscles are slow, less powerful, but have better endurance. One study investigated the distribution of muscle fiber types between humans and chimpanzees had a higher percentage of fast twitch fibers and fewer slow twitch fibers compared to humans. And for humans, it was the opposite. In humans, we have motor neurons in the spinal cord that connect with fewer muscles, which allow for us to have really fine motor skills. It's one of the reasons why we can thread a needle, play an instrument, and fold sheets. That doesn't happen for chimpanzees. Instead, they have a lower density of gray matter in their spinal cord, and that results in a thinly distributed but more powerful muscle activation. Additionally, a higher number of muscle fibers are activated simultaneously, producing an all or nothing type of response. And this overall just limits their fine motor skills. The difference means that while chimpanzees lack the ability to perform delicate movements with the same precision as humans, they can rapidly deploy strength with a powerful force. This is advantageous for climbing and swinging. And because the muscle strength is needed for living in the trees, they are anywhere between 1.3 to 1.5 times stronger than humans. All right, so they're stronger than us. Brains over brawn, right? What's that? They have better memory than us. They are better at strategy and keeping the peace compared to us. Oh, so humans do this thing where we tend to think that we're so much better and overall more intelligent than any other life that's on this planet. It's cuddle time with the kitty cat. I have yet to hear something that really enlightens me about how our intelligence and technological advances that are causing our planet to become less habitable make us so much better than all the other life on this planet. But I'm just an anarcho-primitivist, so whatever. If you remember from my overshoot video, I said that we are following the same course of action that any animal would follow given their ability to overpower nature, in the sense fossil fuels, or really any kind of energy, whether it's solar or fossil fuels or nuclear energy. All of that is kind of like the conduit in which we're using to overpower nature and get ourselves into an overshoot anyways. And I think, like, kind of going on a little side tangent there, but like, people will recognize that chimpanzees are intelligent and they act very similarly to us, but they still believe that they are inferior to us, especially with their cognitive functions, but that's not really the case. It turns out that's really short-sighted, and all animals have strengths and weaknesses, and one of chimpanzees' greatest strengths is their memory. My cat is like right down here. You want to say hi? You want to say hi? His strength is he likes to cuddle a lot. His weakness is after about a minute, he wants to bite the shit out of my hand. So I'm just going to kind of go with it, but that's kind of why there's like this stuff happening down below. Anyway, okay, so memory. You know how like you might look at somebody a little bit longer if you kind of like remember who they were? It may not seem as obvious with direct family members that you see every day, but perhaps there's like a long lost cousin or an uncle that you would see just out in the open, and you're kind of sitting there like, I remember them from somewhere, but I can't really picture it. That's your gaze. You're kind of gazing at them a little bit longer to kind of jog your memory. Chimpanzees and bonobos have the longest long-term memory of any non-human animal. This becomes vital as I will go into their social structures in the next chapter, but they remember whether or not they have a good or a bad interaction with troop members. And they are able to build long-term bonds that last years because of their memory. A 2023 study did an experiment where scientists showed select chimpanzees and bonobos pictures of other members of the troop, both past and present, and then of strangers. In most cases, the apes stared 11% longer at members of their troop. Now, this becomes vital as I will go into their social structures in the next chapter. Overall, the bonobos and the chimpanzees remember their family, even when that member hasn't been seen in quite some time. In an extreme case, one bonobo gazed at their sister who went missing 26 years ago, and that gaze lasted significantly longer than all of the other examples. When apes were given pictures of non-family members that they have interacted with, so that's like the stranger at the party, right? They seem to be able to remember them for up to 9.5 years. So this is indeed, let's say you go to a party, you meet somebody, you have a pretty good conversation, you interact with them enough that you would kind of remember them if you saw them the next day, right? But as time goes on, and if you don't really have any more interaction with them, at a certain period, you might forget that you even met that person altogether. So the study is basically saying that they were able to kind of do that for up to 9.5 years until they like forgot that they interacted with that non-family member altogether. Not only that, but their short-term memory is considered superior to humans. In one study, the numbers 1 through 9 appeared on a screen in random spots. The subjects were tasked with memorizing where they were on the screen. So it's like your classic game of memory. How much time do you think you need to memorize the locations of those numbers? In this study, the chimpanzees were given 600, 430, and then 210 milliseconds to memorize the spatial position of the numbers. Then they had to click on the squares representing where the numbers were and click on them in chronological order. So they had to click on number 1, followed by number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And they had to go through it in that order. And of course, they were taught beforehand the order of the numbers and then how to use a touchscreen. So there within itself, that kind of shows how intelligent chimpanzees are. This study showed a marked difference between the memory of adults and young chimpanzees, with the young doing much better with their memory. Even at 210 milliseconds, something I can't even demonstrate with my editing software because the lowest time measurement is seconds. The younger chimps nailed it. Now, 210 milliseconds, that doesn't really give you enough time to memorize anything. So the scientists believe young chimps have a special kind of photographic memory called eidetic imagery. This is memory capable of retaining an accurate, detailed image of a complex scene or pattern. This is in human children at a relatively high percentage, but then as we age, we kind of lose that ability to have that memorization. For chimps, it appears as though all young chimpanzees have it, and this fades as chimpanzees reach adulthood, but overall their memory is better than ours. Now, a 2014 study pinned chimpanzees against one another, and what they had to do is they had to guess what their opponent would do in a game of strategy. Their performance of accurately guessing what their opponent would do was better than the human test subjects who were tasked with the same game of strategy. That is to say that the chimpanzees had closer matches compared to the humans. This means they are better at remembering the actions of their opponents and then their ability to incorporate the memory of those actions to strategize for the next game. Now, this is applicable in the wild because chimpanzees will use these skills to patrol their territory, navigate in the trees, remember where food is, and form special bonds with troop members. Just like I said, each animal has their strengths and weaknesses, and where chimps took advantage of their memory and strategy for their survival, humans aren't as good at those things, but we found strength in language, and we took advantage of using language for survival. Their intelligence is further demonstrated in their complex communities and social interactions as well, so let's get into the next chapter. Chimpanzees historically lived in communities or troops consisting of 20 to 100 individuals. However, because their habitat is dwindling because of us, the typical troop size is about 20 to 40 individuals now. When group sizes decrease, there may be fewer alliances and resources, and that potentially affects their social structures and then their survival rates. Now, whether they have, the 20 to 100, whatever size the group is, they still operate in something called fusion-fission dynamics, meaning that they have subgroups that will break away from the main group temporarily before they rejoin again. Now, I do want to say the next video is kind of like the last of this unofficial series about chimpanzees. But it is specifically about a full-on civil war that broke out between a subgroup and a main group, and it was a bloodbath. It traumatized Jane Goodall. So we'll be going into that in the next video. Yeah, so if you want to hear more about that, like and subscribe. Where was I? Oh yeah, okay, so going into the subgroups. Now, the reasons for that kind of vary, but generally it seems to be done to reduce aggression within the main group, increase social bonds, and then spread out resources and mating opportunities. Males almost always stay with the same group that they were born in, whereas females will usually kind of assimilate or absorb themselves into another outside community. And of course, that's just so they could kind of spread their genetic diversity. Whether it's the main group or the subgroup, chimpanzees have shown to pass down cultural traditions and refined tool use. Again, this is something that has been seen as uniquely human, and I will say we do it a little bit better, but chimpanzees do pass down cultural traditions. So generally the way that this happens is it's very similar to how it happens with humans. First, the young chimp will learn mainly from their mom, and then from others in their communities, and then from others in subgroups or other communities entirely. So this is kind of like when you're growing up, you're mostly learning things from your mom and dad directly, and then maybe one day you kind of notice Uncle Joe has some differing worldviews, so you start hanging out with him a little bit more to see what that's all about, and then you go to college and you kind of are, exposed to the whole gambit of worldviews. Now, with chimpanzees, they're not necessarily passing down worldviews. It's really more behaviors and tool use, but kind of the same idea. And the study that I'm referencing talked about kind of like the mom's willingness to expose her young to all of these different traditions, whether it's from relatives or subgroups or whatever, that was considered tolerance. When a community is structured with a lot of tolerance, it means that there's a lot of learning from other individuals. And that means tools will be invented for potential cultural adoption. And that means that inevitably all that stuff ends up getting passed down to future generations. The more that a community or troop is willing or tolerant to passing down information and learning from that information that's being passed down to them, the better the troop does overall. In fact, there is a correlation between young chimpanzees having a greater gestural repertoire developed when young have mothers that are more social. But what happens when a community or mothers are intolerant to kind of like that socialization, social learning, traditions, whatever it is you want to call it? Like what happens if a chimpanzee mom is purposely sheltering their young from cultural tool use and gestural behaviors? It's possible that intolerance is an unexpected outcome when competition for resources are high. Or you just have a dick chimpanzee that doesn't want to share their experience. The latter probably warrants a little bit more research. However, it does kind of make sense that if competition for resources are high, you're going to have a chimpanzee or a bunch of them that don't really want to pass down information to maybe, extract more food from a plant, a tree, whatever, because they want to keep it all to themselves. Because let's say food resources are scarce at that specific time. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Again, they're just like us. Social interactions and community togetherness looks insanely similar to political behavior in humans. Like, it's no secret that chimpanzees are governed by a patriarchal system, and it usually consists of one alpha male and then other males with whom the alpha male is forming coalitions. The lower level males could be friends from their childhood, they could be brothers, or they could just be kind of general supporters. Jane Goodall has spoken on two brothers, Frodo and Freud, who had their time as alpha males. Freud maintained control on forming alliances, strong bonds, and grooming with those he wanted to control. His brother, on the other hand, was abusive and maintained control with hitting to get others to submit. Now, the leaderships are fluid, much like our political system, but instead of having set terms for political positions, there could just be other coalitions that are kind of conspiring in secret to overthrow the alpha male. Generally, an alpha male maintains their role for about 3 to 5 years, but they are challenged very, very often. Like, they're constantly being challenged to be overthrown so another male could take their position. And the alpha male may lose their status when they become too old. Like, they literally can't fight off a younger, stronger opponent. They may not have a large and or young supporter base compared to the opponent, or the community is just unstable, so there are more challenges than usual. As a result, the length and time in which an alpha stays in power is shorter because getting challenged every day just kind of wears on the alpha male. Again, this scenario is more common when troop sizes are small, so their current numbers are disrupting the stability of chimpanzees' social structure. So you actually do want to see an alpha male staying in position for a fairly long time. It doesn't seem like 3 to 5 years is all that long, but you kind of want to be able to hold that position around that long, because anything less than that, it usually means that there's like something's up with the community and they're kind of unstable. Overall, the jobs and the perks of the alpha male may include having better access to food, mating partners, maintaining social order, and then resolving conflicts. For example, males will initiate grooming as a form of conflict resolution. This is effective because it reassures that everyone is okay, right? They're all cool, everything's good, and it reduces tension within the community. And then, of course, that works towards restoring the social bond and then the overall community balance. As far as maintaining social order goes, that generally means that the alpha male is leading the groups to find food, they're deciding on where to sleep for the night, they're fending off threats, protecting young, and then patrolling the territory. Now, females aren't background characters in the patriarchy. They have their own hierarchy where the alpha position is acquired through bonds and personality. It does not seem like the alpha female position is acquired through brute strength, Much like alpha males, alpha females will have access to better foods and more chances of reproducing. And females demonstrate nepotism because offspring of higher ranking females usually go on to have the same higher ranking status. Now, the positional power for females is more fluid than males, so it's shorter than that 3 to 5 year period, but it's almost kind of the same on why a female is overthrown from her position. Basically, factors such as age, her health, and then just changes in social dynamic could all be reasons for why a alpha female steps down from her position. And this is typically done because, like, the supporter base is just starting to weaken, so the people who once supported the current alpha female now feel like they don't have a leg to stand on to support her anymore, and she steps down. Now, all of these things considered, from their intelligence and their strength and social interactions, how they move about on the planet, chimpanzees are more than just a cool animal to learn about. Their ecology is extremely important. Oftentimes, animals are associated with a notable ecological service. Like in my beaver video, I talked about how they are known as ecosystem engineers. Predators are also known as regulators. But the reality is animals usually have many different ecological services, and the chimpanzee is no different. If I were to assign them the cute little slang terms that are meant to help you pass your exams, I'd say that they are engineers, gardeners, and regulators. Chimpanzees are not as innovative as beavers for the engineer ecosystem service, but they do a few things that modify their environment, and in turn, other animals benefit from those activities, and then ecosystems get healthier. Now, as I said before, chimpanzees spend about 50% of their time in the trees, and as they are moving about, they are foraging, and they're breaking branches, they're plucking fruit, and they're stripping leaves off of branches to eat. This allows for the canopy to open up and sunlight to either reach the forest floor or reach younger trees getting shaded out by older ones. This means a wide variety of plants are given the opportunity to grow, and in turn, the ecosystem will support more insects, more birds, and other critters in the area. The other thing they do as an engineer is they travel, covering vast distances, and every night the alpha male selects a spot to sleep. So in order to do that, they start to gather up a whole bunch of materials from the trees, and they build these nests. And this is yet another way in which they're kind of pruning, essentially, so that more sunlight could reach the forest floor or provide sunlight to some of the younger plants. When chimpanzees move on to the next location, it's not like they pick up their nest and they carry it with them. They leave them there. And usually, if you exclude like the mother and the young, each chimpanzee makes their own nest. So there's not a whole lot of sharing that's going on. And so if you have a troop of 40 individuals, not including the young, then that means you probably have 40 nests up in the trees. All of those nests are considered microhabitats because insects, fungi, and small animals take up residence to make those leafy outcroppings their home. As a gardener, they help spread seeds as they are either pooping out tiny seeds that they ate from the fruit, or they are eating fruit as they go, and then they're dropping the seeds when they're done with it. And they travel like pretty far distances, so they're just kind of spreading out the distribution of the plant by dropping the seeds in the manner that they do. This is kind of what I'm packaging up as the ecosystem service for a gardener, but this is often also considered a engineering ecosystem service. Lastly, they're considered regulators. So for the regulator, they eat anything from small mammals to insects, which means that they are keeping those populations in check, and that lands up being a disease prevention control for that population, as well as reducing the competition for resources within the species populations. So Sally, I'm sorry, Uncle Joe had to be eaten, but now there's more resources for you to survive. I mean, death is as much of a necessity for an animal's survival as birth is. Now, because of all of those ecosystem services, chimpanzees are considered keystone species, meaning if they're not doing that hot and they're really not providing those ecosystem services, then other animals in the ecosystem suffer in return. So if the chimpanzees' numbers aren't looking all that great, they're engineering, they're gardening, they're regulating, they aren't happening at the scale that is needed to ensure that those animal populations in the ecosystems can actually be healthy and they could regenerate. So that is to say, like, if you remove a keystone species, it's very possible that other animals will go extinct because of their absence, and then ecosystems will kind of die and transform into something else as a result. So it's just overall no bueno. Today, it is estimated that between 180 to 340,000 chimpanzees exist in the world today. Those numbers are down from an estimated 1 million nearly 60 years ago. On par with the trends of all animals, chimpanzees are facing extinction because of human expansion, which results in their habitat being converted into urban or agricultural environments. In addition, their habitat is butting up to human establishments, which means wildlife-human conflicts are increasing. Chimpanzees are being illegally hunted for bushmeat, and in some areas, diseases that are impacting people are being transmitted to the chimpanzees. In 1996, Jane Goodall witnessed a polio outbreak in a community that she was studying. But even today, viruses in the same family as the flu and RSV are impacting chimpanzees, and they've been impacted by that for over 35 years. They are getting infected with Ebola, the yellow fever, and COVID-19. Now, having learned all that was required to make this video, I do not know how anyone can look at a chimpanzee and not feel empathy or just be at awe at the intelligence that is here right on this planet. Like, I don't know why the Bezos and the Musks of the world are trying to look to the stars for the intelligence when, like, just look around you. All of the animals on this planet have intelligence. It's right here. Dumbass. If you want to help in the fight for chimpanzee conservation, I have put links to some organizations down in the description box below. That includes the Jane Goodall Institute and other organizations that are either trying to preserve chimpanzee habitat or trying to work with the local people so that they become better stewards to their environment. Other than that, I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more from me, and we'll see you in the next one.